Emotions running very high and hot at another school board meeting in Loudoun County last night. Parents calling out the school's social justice agenda.
Critical race theory, it's not America.
We need critical race theory because we need real history.
It's not over. It's not over.
I don't think parents should be telling schools what they should teach.
An issue that McAuliffe says parents should not have a say in.
On day one, we will not have political agendas in the classroom, and I will ban critical race theory. All righty, Virginia, we won this thing!
Glenn Youngkin is the governor-elect of the Commonwealth of Virginia.
Part of the credit for your victory there in Virginia went to your stance on schools. In fact, one of your first two executive orders was to, quote, end the use of divisive concepts in public education, including critical race theory.
Well, anyone who thinks that the concepts that actually underpin critical race theory are not in our schools hasn't been in our schools. And oh, by the way, I think the school systems in Virginia, and particularly in Loudoun County, have been doing everything they can to try to obfuscate the fact that the curriculum has moved in a very, very opaque way that has hidden a lot of this from parents. I've instructed our Secretary of Education, our State Superintendent of Public Schools, to review the curriculum and get racially divisive and other divisive teaching concepts out of the school system.
I have chills. Ladies and gentlemen, Secretary of Education for the Commonwealth of Virginia, Aimee Guidera.
Hi, Virginia. Thank you so much for having me. And Lisa, thank you for the kind invitation to join this important gathering of change agents. It's an honor to be with all of you and also to learn from each other. And that really is the power of convenings like ALEC, of bringing the great ideas from across this country together. And as we all know, the Federation, right? That how the great experiments that happen in states and how do we learn to make this country as great as possible. So thank you. And thank you also for that really powerful video that reminds us of two grounding facts that I think we all need to keep in our hearts as we march out of this and back into our lives at home. First of all, Americans know how important education is to the future of our nation. And equally important, engaged and informed citizens, especially parents, have and will continue to use their voices to make positive change happen. Yes. So this is the story of Virginia, and it can be the story in every state across our great country. So COVID illuminated, as we just heard from Dr. King, that COVID illuminated and exacerbated what was already happening. Our students were not achieving at the levels that they needed to compete in our global economy and to be on track for future success. And worse, pernicious academic achievement gaps between and among traditionally underserved populations, students of color and students from low-income backgrounds, were growing. But COVID did do something else, which we also heard earlier today. Because education was happening on screens in our living rooms, in our kitchens, it brought to light what our kids and our teachers were spending their time on instead of learning how to read, how to write, and how to compute. Parent frustration and anger grew when they saw that increasingly valuable instruction time was spent on inherently divisive concepts and in places indoctrination. And we also know that their children, they got more and more frustrated and upset when they realized that their children were also getting more and more behind on what really mattered. The individual and collective voices of our parents have changed the conversation around education, and we thank all of them for being passionate, committed, and parents who care, and for standing up for their own children and for ours as a country. So it turns out that it's not only parents who recognize that things have gotten off track in our schools. And I encourage you to take a look at this slide because there's a lot to talk about and it's pretty jaw-dropping. And it's something that we should have conversations about here and when we go. But when you look at this, and I want to give a shout out to Bruce Melman who put together this data based on the polls that just came out last week from the American Federation of Teachers and the Democrats for Education Reform. And I'm going to quote here, what you see this picture, and what's amazing is what has happened in 2022. But let me quote some of the things that came out of those two polls. That the respondents to these two polls found that respondents have more confidence in Republican approaches to education, They hold Democrats more responsible for politicizing education and making education too much a part of the culture wars. And 3, they were dissatisfied with the amount of say that parents have in what their children are taught. This is a wow. While voters overall trust Republicans over Democrats by 4 points, I want you to look at the bottom box on this slide. The news here is that overall by 4 points, but parents by 9 points, and by folks who identify as not being white by 10 points. And just pause on that for a second. This is a winning issue. And in Virginia, we are listening to and joining in the conversations that are happening around kitchen tables, at barbershops, and in coffees after church. And we are prioritizing common sense approaches to put students first and to restore excellence to education in every community across the Commonwealth. You know, we just saw in this great video that the first 2 actions that the governor took within an hour of being sworn in on day 1 were to sign in these 2 executive orders, which ended instructional practices of discrimination, which are in violation of the Civil Rights Act, and also to commit to restore excellence to education and to reaffirm the rights of parents in the upbringing, education, and care of their children. And every single day since day 1, Governor Youngkin has focused on providing every learner, regardless of background or zip code, with opportunities to access a quality education. And it's been a busy 7 months. Working in partnership with aligned members of the General Assembly, many of whom are here today, and I want to shout out to, there are many highlights of what's happened in the last 7 months, and I just want to go through them quickly. 1, we honored the rights of parents to make decisions about their children's education and health. A couple of very important things. We protected parent decision-making about their own child's mask wearing through guidance and then through legislation. We also identified and ended the use of instruction that teaches or practices discrimination. Second of all, we expanded and protected education freedom and innovation in all education environments. This includes creating a $100 million innovation fund, an investment fund to support the launch of dozens of pioneering innovation lab schools across the Commonwealth by our public and private 2- and 4-year higher education institutions. And we also protected our tax credit scholarship program from being reduced by half. Third of all, we are starting to restore excellence to education, including having high expectations, increased transparency, and stronger accountability. And let me highlight one critical example in this. We found out, because this data's been sitting, it's been collected, I'm a big fan of using data, but so often what we find out is that we're collecting data in education and we're not getting it back into the hands of people so that they know what's going on. And this is a great case. 42% of our second graders, and this is data that's been collected over several years and no one ever saw until this year, 42% are not on track to be able to read independently by the time they get to 3rd grade. That's a travesty, and that is a crisis that is already happening. This year, our General Assembly passed and we signed the Virginia Literacy Act, which will be focused on the science of reading and integrating that into everything we do. In normal people, we call this phonics. And this will transform reading instruction so that every single child will be able to read on grade level, and it starts today. Fourth, we've supported safe and vibrant learning environments. This includes increasing state support of our school resource officers by more than 5-fold. We will be able to put 350 new SROs and improve safety audits. And also, we are the Attorney General is looking into the mishandling of sexual assault incidents, which we saw in the video as well. Our students and our families deserve to know that they are safe and in an environment where learning is prioritized and they come home happy and safe every single day from school. And finally, we made a historic investment in teachers and schools. We know that our teachers are exhausted, and we also know that having a quality teacher is one of the most important indicators of student success. And so we are going to invest in our teachers. We're going to make sure that we attract, grow, and retain the best teachers possible, because we know that's absolutely critical. And so our teachers have a 10% increase, and we also did landmark investments in our construction to make sure that our buildings are up to code and are ready for kids to learn. So I'd like to actually ask the members of the Virginia delegation to stand, because without their leadership and guidance, none of this would have been possible. So please stand. And So thank you. Please find one of those folks that stand and ask them how they did it and take it back to your own state. So real fast. So one of the most important activities of the last 7 months was releasing our commitment to Virginians, high expectations and excellence for all students. Why this matters and why there are three critical components to restoring excellence in Virginia's education, and this report laid it out. First of all, it provides a stark, data-based overview of where we stand now in the state. It offers the foundational principles which will guide every decision and every action that we take to reach our goals. And third of all, it provides a clear vision of success. So let me start very quickly with what our current state is, which is not what you would think with our stellar reputation. Bottom line is, our reading scores have fallen every year since 2010. 45% of all seniors, including 76% of our Black and 56% of our Hispanic seniors, are not college ready as determined by the SAT. And our learning loss in Virginia is bigger than the average of the nation. And why? Because we all knew the longer you stay out of school, the less you're going to learn. And those that were further behind got even further behind. Common sense is now backed up by data. And of course, we have excellence in education in Virginia. I first moved to Virginia 27 years ago because of the quality of the schools. And yet this is not the norm across the Commonwealth. And we are working every day to make sure that exceptional education is not the exception, it is the norm in Virginia, and that every family has access to a great school. Bottom line is, how do we get to this point where that's not the reality? And let me just give a couple quick things. One, we had an insidious combination of lowered expectations and a lack of transparency. President George W. Bush called this the soft bigotry of low expectations. I call it just plain wrong. First of all, our State Board of Education changed the accreditation requirements in 2017 to de-emphasize grade level proficiency, and they also lowered cut scores. We basically lowered the floor, and by that we also lowered the ceilings for all of our kids. And bottom line, we also have the biggest honesty gap. There's a difference between what we're telling families that kids are ready for success and they're proficient, and what we know our kids are looking at on NAEP. So bottom line is, we have not been providing families, teachers, and taxpayers with an accurate picture of academic reality. And even without that accurate picture, parents know that many public schools aren't working for their kids. In fact, the number of homeschooled students have soared, with a 90% increase in transfers between 2019 and 2021, and close to 6,000 students have transferred from Virginia's public school system into in-state private schools in the 2000-2001 school year. But I'm here to tell you that the tides are turning in the Commonwealth. Rest assured, the era of significant lowering of expectations, a lack of transparency, and weak accountability for results is over in Virginia. Yeah. So our commitment, and the commitment that this governor made on his first day and that we continue to make when we release this expectation, is that we will do the following. We are going to establish and maintain high expectations for students, for schools, and ourselves as the adults. Second of all, we are going to advance parent and teacher empowerment to best serve students in partnership. We are going to demand zero tolerance for discrimination in education. We're going to foster innovation in all education environments, provide transparency so that every child is seen and receives what he or she needs to succeed. And we're going to ensure that post-secondary readiness is our goal at all points so that all learners can succeed in life. And finally, we are going to protect and nurture freedom of speech and inquiry to ensure that every student is taught how to think, what not to think, and not what to think. You know, I could spend an hour on any one of these principles, and I'm happy to talk about it in our questions and answers. But what I want to say, and please know, that while this seems like this is a very ambitious agenda, the prioritization and execution of every one of these principles is critical to a student-centered education reform across the state. So as my time comes to a close and we move into a panel discussion and hear from Secretary DeVos first, I want to urge all of you to prioritize this approach to student-centered education reform. You know, Governor Youngkin is proving that Republicans and conservatives can win and can govern by making common sense education policy a #1 priority. Together, let's keep doing what we know is right. Let's embrace high expectations for every single child. Let's focus on preparing them for what comes next after school. Let's ensure that parents are empowered and engaged in their children's education. And let's put an end to the one-size-fits-all system that is keeping people from their true abilities. And let's create a culture of innovation. Our future as the greatest nation in the world depends on an education system that sees every learner, meets him or her where they are, and gets them to what they need to do and where they need to go to become an engaged and productive member of their community and an informed and engaged member of our democracy. We cannot afford to lose another generation. It's immoral and it's un-American. This is the land of opportunity. Every Virginian and every American must have access to an education that allows them to attain the American dream. Our collective future depends on it. Thank you.